Haunting isn't easy in this economy.
That was the thought passing through Beetlejuice's mind as he rifled through his mail in his run-down netherworld condo. The world's greatest freelance bio-exorcist was having a legendary dry spell, drier than the sand dunes of Jupiter, where striped sandworms eternally patrol looking for prey. There were no new jobs in his correspondences, just bills, a notification to renew his ghost license, and some undead Nigerian prince scams. If things kept going on like this, he'd need to go beg his old boss, Juno, for his job as an afterlife caseworker's assistant back. He tossed the mail aside and snapped his fingers, causing the letters to go up in a shock of green flame, adding to the big pile of ash in the corner. Little did the ghost with the most know. The contract of an after-lifetime was about to come down the pipe, and this time, he was going to be up against a truly formidable opponent. Up above in Site-19, another D-Class had just been horrifically murdered by SCP-682. That's just another day at the office for the researchers and guards, but for the D-Class, an old ex-con named Lutzko, it was a particularly eventful one, and he was as surprised as anyone else who would be when death wasn't it for him. In fact, he'd become an instance of SCP-4973, one of the many D-Class ghosts haunting various Foundation facilities across the globe. While bodies still bore the claw scars that killed him, Lutzko was otherwise basically himself, aside from floating and being see-through. Not a bad deal, all things considered. He was immediately greeted by a fellow SCP-4973 instance, a former D-Class named Brightman, who was dripping with unpleasant goo, his face partially skeletonized. It made Lutzko realize he'd actually gotten off pretty well in this whole thing.
Welcome to the whole being dead thing, Brightman said. 682 got you. You got lucky, man.
Lutzko didn't know what to say. Not because all of the existential implications of life after death being real, but because he was hard of hearing, and that had somehow passed on to his afterlife counterpart too.
You get cool scars, the ghost of Brightman said. I got eaten by a swarm of anomalous scarab beetles, so I'm gonna spend the rest of my afterlife covered in Beetlejuice.
What? Lutzko asked.
Beetlejuice. I'm sorry, one more time. Beetlejuice.
There was a tremendous flash of light and green smoke spread out through the room. Out from this glowing pall, a rotten man with wild hair wearing a black and white striped suit cartwheeled through the air into the room. It was hard to shock people who'd already been killed by horrific anomalies, but this jazzy entrance somehow managed that. Coming to a stop, Beetlejuice pulled a pair of sunglasses out of his suit jacket, slid them on, and gave a grin full of yellow teeth.
You rang, fellas.
This had been an unexpected turn of events, to say the least. As members of the undead who just said the words Beetlejuice, well, technically Beetlejuice, but let's not split hairs, 3 times in a row, they'd summoned the lovable, demonic SOB himself to cause some mayhem and possibly even murder on their behalf. Lutzko and Brightman were a little skeptical at first, being hardened ex-cons who'd both been murdered by monsters because of the good guys. But when Beetlejuice explained his services, punishing and tormenting the living on behalf of the dead, they became very interested in making a deal with him.
Wow, you're telling me we got a whole building of pencil-necked paranormal peons complete with anti-ghost gizmos and doodads, plus a whole host of monsters that are not afraid to set on people and ex-people?
Beetlejuice said, stroking a long beard that he didn't have.
And you want me to haunt the living hell out of these geeks till they regret the crap they put you through, and or die so you can settle the score yourselves? Then I think you fine upstanding folks are gonna love my deluxe package.
Yes, he did grab his groin for emphasis with an audible honk honk when he said that part about his package. Beetlejuice was many things. A professional poltergeist, a man and a womanizer, and a cum laude graduate of Juilliard. But classy wasn't among them. This contract would be a little more demanding than scaring an arty couple out of a rustic house or giving a Girl Scout a heart attack on the doorstep, but BJ had always liked a challenge.
It's showtime!
His campaign of terror began in the Foundation canteen. It was chicken pot pie day for all the staff of Site-19, a bright spot in an otherwise distressing work environment, and a certain bio-exorcist was about to ruin it. As the various researchers and guards took their seats, ready to make workplace banter and enjoy their fresh hot pies, a ghostly wailing pervaded the room. Everyone looked up around the room. Was this the result of some anomaly they'd already cataloged? But while they were busy contemplating, skeletal hands reached out of the pies and geysers of black ooze and grabbed their would-be enjoyers around their throats. As they struggled against the homicidal pastries, a flock of vampire bats entered the room, swooping in and attacking anyone who hadn't picked up a pie yet. They could only hope they were all up to date on their rabies shots. But one of Beetlejuice's other skills was multitasking. On a canvas the size of Site 19, he could unveil some true large-scale artistry, like an evil supernatural Banksy. Next, he felt like causing some trouble in the archives. Something about the Dewey Decimal System had always rubbed him the wrong way. Archive Sims had spent all day among the filing cabinets, taking old Foundation memos written in pre-computer days and digitizing them for later use. It was perhaps the most boring and tedious work physically imaginable, and Sims loved every minute of it. It was quiet, peaceful, and there was nobody there to bother him. Until now. Archivist Sims was jarred from the classical music playing on his personal radio when a drawer in one of the filing cabinets seemed to open by itself. He trundled over and closed it again, only to see another one open nearby. And another, and another, and another. One of the rapidly opening drawers hit him in the shin. Another caught the side of his face and would probably leave a bruise. Soon enough, so many drawers had opened around Archivist Sims that he was trapped between them. And that's when the tarantulas started crawling out of them. As Archivist Sims screamed, the spiders crawled over his sweater vest. The radio switched from the soothing sounds of Chopin to the grating butt-rock sounds of Nickelback. "No! Make it stop, please!" Archivist Sims screamed. And because Archivist Sims asked so nicely, it did. The tarantulas were gone, the drawers were all closed, and the throaty vocals of Chad Kroeger were replaced by the soothing notes of Chopin once again. Sims breathed a sigh of relief. It must have been another one of his little psychotic breaks. No biggie, he'd just start taking his medication again. But he'd worry about that later. He had a job to do now. Sims removed a piece of paper from one of the filing cabinets and prepared to properly refile it when he noticed something horrible. The text on the page. It was all in wingdings. No, this had to be some kind of mistake. Sims checked another file. Wingdings again. He checked every file he could, frantically pulling them out of drawers. Wingdings, wingdings, wingdings. The entire archive that he'd spent his life organizing was ruined. "No!" Archivist Sims screamed. "Bring back the tarantulas!" And BJ was just getting started. He unlocked 682's containment cell and let it rampage through half of the facility. He put dead raccoons in all of the air conditioners, making the place stink to high heaven. He even sent a mass email around half of the computer terminals that claimed to be an important Foundation orientation video, but were actually compromising photos of members of the O5 Council in various states of undress. How he got these photos is still a mystery. While pandemonium broke out all across the facility, Beetlejuice was preparing an equally nasty prank in Rec Room C, where Dr. Gears and Dr. Clef had both brewed large cups of coffee and were reclining on one of the couches. As the duo of senior researchers chatted, Dr. Gears took a long swig of his mocha, only to immediately spit it onto the ground. There was a live cockroach writhing in the brown puddle, one that a few seconds ago had been in the researcher's mouth. Dr. Clef, jerk that he is, laughed. "I told you put too much sugar in your coffee, Charles." But it was his turn now. The couch under them suddenly started bucking like a bronco, or like the bed in Beetlejuice's favorite feel-good comedy, The Exorcist. Both researchers were thrown off, their coffee mugs shattering against the ground, usual suspects style. They turned and looked at the couch. If Dr. Clef had his favorite pump action, he probably would have filled it with buckshot by now. But Clef had been forbidden from taking firearms into the rec room since the incident. Instead, all they could do was watch as the upholstery ripped and an immense, slithering creature emerged. It was a snake, a massive, rubbery snake, with a grinning face of a certain bio-exorcist.
"What, you didn't make a cup for me?"
He snarled.
"I can see why Brightman and Lutzko can't stand you guys. You're so freaking inconsiderate."
Dr. Gears reached into his lab coat to grab his Foundation communicator and call for help, but the Beetlejuice snake slapped him in the face with its mighty tail, knocking him across the room and hitting his head into the wall. Clef was frozen in horror. Like Indiana Jones, he was typically a courageous maverick who feared almost nothing. But also, like Indiana Jones, his one exception was snakes. Dr. Clef really hated snakes. The Beetlejuice snake slithered and coiled around Clef, squeezing until he felt the pressure on his bones. If the fear wasn't going to make him pass out soon enough, the oxygen deprivation would do the job for him.
What kind of name is Alto anyway?
Beetlejuice asked.
Guess I really don't have room to criticize you there, actually, so I'm just gonna kill you instead.
But before Beetlejuice could fulfill that promise, the door to the rec room was kicked open, and members of MTF Mu-13, also known as the Ghostbusters, burst into the room. They yelled for Beetlejuice to freeze, aiming their thaumaturgically enhanced assault rifles. The poltergeist rolled his eyes and returned to his humanoid form, striped suit and all.
You Foundation geeks sure know how to roll out the welcome wagon, huh? An edible arrangement and a card would have been fine. You didn't need to send everybody out.
The Ghostbusters weren't impressed. They raised their weapons and prepared to fire, when Beetlejuice snapped his dirty fingers. Suddenly, the mobile task force were all dressed like clowns, and their assault rifles had become balloon animals tied into the shapes of guns. Beetlejuice laughed and disappeared out of the room, leaving everyone there thoroughly humiliated. Clef and Gears rose to their feet, trying to regain their footing and their pride. Gears couldn't help but notice something the irritating demon had said. I can see why Brightman and Lutzko can't stand you guys. Gears recognized those names. They were two D-classes who'd recently died in experiments. Thanks to SCP-4973, there was already documented evidence of the consciousnesses of dead D-class personnel persisting into the afterlife. But the idea of them colluding with an even more powerful and dangerous supernatural entities was unprecedented. Beetlejuice had all the makings of a chaotic Keter class. They needed to marshal their forces before things got any more out of hand. But it may have already been too late on that front. Beetlejuice was busy being a menace in the halls. He'd somehow manifested a working roller coaster with tracks threaded through the building, which he'd nicknamed Mr. Bone Stripper, as a reference to his other favorite movie, the underrated 1991 Dan Aykroyd classic, Nothing But Trouble. The ride was so fast and frightening that it literally scared the skin off of the Foundation staff riding it, reducing them to dead skeletons. We added the qualifier dead there, because Beetlejuice had also summoned plenty of living skeletons that were chasing researchers and guards around the building. The deluxe haunting package really didn't mess around, and Brightman and Lutzko were truly getting some bang for their spectral buck on this one. The juice was loose, and another group of armed guards ran in to intercept him, pistols and shotguns at the ready.
How quaint.
Beetlejuice extended his arm, his clenched fist becoming a huge and cartoonish hammer. With one strike, the entire team was smashed through the ground, leaving outlines of their bodies in the floor. This was the most fun that he had had in centuries, and none of these clowns knew that he could be banished again if any of them said his name another 3 times. That, however, didn't mean that Dr. Gears wasn't planning a counteroffensive, though Dr. Clef had requested to sit this one out, because he really didn't feel up to having another snake encounter today. Following the supernatural phenomena through the halls on the security cameras, Gears could see that Beetlejuice was heading straight towards Containment Block C. Then that's where he would spring his trap. Back in the halls, Beetlejuice was still basking in the chaos. He was trapping people inside broom closets and letting off fireworks with them inside.
Classic.
That's when he heard the familiar voice of Dr. Gears down the hall, standing in an adjoining room. I only take one 15-minute break per day, he said. I don't appreciate you ruining my coffee during that time. Now that was funny. Gears thought a bug in his coffee and a minor concussion was Beetlejuice's idea of ruining someone's day. That was almost an invitation. The demented ghoul laughed and swooped in, summoning up his power for one perfectly nasty piece de resistance, when he was suddenly frozen by the Scranton reality anchors that had been hidden around the room where Dr. Gears was standing. The Foundation's most straight-laced researcher was not above using himself as live bait. A few weeks later, Beetlejuice sat in the center of his incorporeal entity vacuum chamber, surrounded by Harrington hollow neutralizer wards bouncing a little rubber ball he'd manifested against the wall. He'd been carving tally marks for the days he'd been here into the concrete with his long, dirty fingernails. Occasionally, he'd even play old prison tunes on a little harmonica. while contemplating plans for his next escape attempt. He certainly knew how to keep those Foundation stooges on their toes.
But hey,
He thought,
things could be worse.
3 hots and a cock, and a limitless supply of guys who'd take themselves way too seriously that he could annoy whenever he got bored.
Beats the hell out of Jupiter.
He muttered. Now check out Revenge of D-Class Ghosts, SCP-4973, Dead Men Walking, and SCP-2696, Haunted Victorian Mansion for more Foundation hauntings.